to some extent. And we shared that video where someone is interviewing him regarding what his thoughts are on what transpired with Mr. Bush. Sorry. I'm in my morning get up. This is about to hit the shower and get my morning started. I stay up quite late at night, and so my mornings start a little bit later, I think, than most of you. But so when I first shared it in my news group, I had one person who has a handicapped sibling message me, and they said, hey, you know, I thought that this was taking advantage of him. This is highly wrong, and this shouldn't be done. And I said, okay. I said, that's interesting, because that's not how I personally saw it. And then I explained to them what I saw was an individual. I don't know the extent of his handicap. And in fact, I did not even know that he was considered a special needs person in that sense of the word, because sometimes people may have a speech impediment or something of the sort. But to me, that's, you know, they have a speech impediment. Like, I don't see that as a handicap that's going to prevent them from participating in anything that we do. So, as I said to her, when I saw the video, and again, I don't know who recorded the video, but when I saw the video, what actually occurred to me is, yes, this guy obviously, you know, doesn't have the capacity to speak as fluently as some of us. He doesn't have a big vocabulary. But despite that, here's someone who can see the truth. Now, whether or not we believe this man has a lesser intellectual capacity than the rest of us, I don't know. You know, I don't know anything about him, so I can't make any of those assumptions or assertions. But as I read some of the additional comments, there was only a handful of people who were extremely offended about, oh, you know, you're abusing this man. Well, we didn't do the video, first of all. We didn't go and seek him out. We didn't ask him any questions. And I don't know if the person who did knew him personally, or they just decided to ask him questions. I can't speak to any of that, because I do not know who recorded the video. But the thing that I wanted to say is, assumptions and presumptions are a hell of a thing. So a lot of times we like to, and hey, I'm guilty of it. We're all guilty of it. We like to jump to conclusions, make statements, make assertions that are based on our perspective, our experience, our life view, without thinking about any alternatives. Now, I grew up in the States, and I grew up around handicapped people, as you guys see on a daily basis. I try to fight for people to even just have basic right to their parking. Handicapped people have right to their parking so that, you know, they're not inconvenienced by lazy people who just don't want to walk a certain distance. So when I saw the video, what occurred to me is, this person has some impediment, but they are able to participate. They have an opinion. Can handicapped people not have an opinion? I mean, even if this gentleman has some sort of mental handicap, right? So I don't know, like I said, I don't know what his personal issues are. But in my opinion, he seems to be aware of what's happening in his community. He has an opinion on it. This person asked him questions. I think some of the questions are tongue-in-cheek, and they're a little bit amusing for those of us who've been following the situation. But I also thought that they were very serious questions. And at the end of the day, if he can see what has transpired here, and he knows, despite us thinking he might have a limited intellectual capacity, if this gentleman knows what transpired and he has a viewpoint on it, and in my opinion, he made the correct comments, he seems to be well informed, he seems extremely sensible, what is wrong with interviewing him? Do we still live in a world where people who have handicaps are to be shut in. They're to be locked in a house. They're to be locked at the various homes that try to accommodate them on this island. All they're good for is to sit down and do arts and crafts all day. They're not to have an opinion on what's happening in our community. Are they not to be sharing in the democratic process? Is this gentleman allowed to vote? I mean, maybe, I bet you one thing, I bet you anything, he votes. And he's allowed to have an opinion when it comes to voting. And if he understands who he wants to vote for and who he wants to represent him, does he not have the same right to have an opinion on something that has transpired with one of his elected officials? And so for those of you who thought, like I said, CMR didn't do the video. We didn't send anybody out there to do it. We don't really know this gentleman. We were not even in West Bay yesterday. But for those of you who thought that the mere act of interviewing him is insulting or problematic, or that automatically means that he is being made fun of, I would encourage you to consider an alternative view. I respected the fact that he has a view, that he wants to share it, that he wants to participate in the process. If he can comprehend the questions, which it appeared fully to me that he did, and he can, by comprehending the questions, he can answer them. He didn't go into some huge diatribe and use big words, but none of that is required. This is such a simple topic. And the juxtaposition of this gentleman being able to understand the issues at hand, knowing that what transpired was wrong and being able to express that, versus other people who think they're smarter than him. And I say that because they may be book smart, but when it comes to common sense, this man trumps a lot of people. So there are people who think that they're smarter than him, and they have come to the conclusion that, well, I don't see anyone admitting to being, I don't see this apology letter amounting to confirming that someone was assaulted. I didn't read that in the apology letter. Oh, nothing has gone on here, this, that, and the next thing. So I think this man is more capable than some other people who consider themselves politically involved and always have a lot to say and always have big words to use. So that was the perspective when I saw the video. I'm like, wow, this gentleman gets it. He understands the issue of abuse. He knows that it's wrong. And in the circumstances of what he knows about it, just like what we know about it, he's of the clear opinion that an abuse took place, an assault, an abusive incident took place. So again, for the few people, and it's always one or two people that are like kicking up all this dust and trying to make things, a certain way on our page at times. For the few people that have commented thinking that this gentleman was being made fun of, I wish to give you an alternative view. And again, I can't speak to the intent of the person who did the recording because I certainly didn't send them. I didn't do it myself. So intent does matter. But I am hopeful that, and I mean, the questions are, when you look at the video, the questions are actually very serious. The first question says, I'm just having a look at it again. I'm just waiting for it to come up here. But basically, what took place, like it's even asking him and testing his knowledge of what transpired. And does he think this, excuse of, this woman was trying to help me and I don't remember what happened, is a viable excuse? And this guy was like, no, he doesn't believe it. He was like, come on, this is foolishness. And then, I completely agree with what this person, like I said, I don't know him, what he's saying. And I think his comments, they've named him as Mr. Albert. I think Mr. Albert's comments are extremely sensible. So, when people like George Ebanks says, why are we trying to make fun of him? by sharing this video, that was not the intent. Everyone is entitled to an opinion. If Mr. Albert, despite whatever issues he may have, has an opinion, then he's entitled to it. And why shouldn't we share his opinion? He's not a shutaway. If he wants to participate in something, if he's being interviewed and he gave consent to that, I think Mr. Albert fully understood that he was being interviewed. You could see him looking at the camera and answering the questions, and hopefully that person provided full disclosure in terms of the fact that they were interviewing him. What would prevent him from participating? I want to tell you guys a story because, again, perspective is a hell of a thing. And, you know, I don't share a lot of things that I do in the community, and in particular that I do for people. This platform is used to help people as much as we can. So whether it's trying to help people recover a lost bird, stolen phones, you know, and educate people on environmental issues, educate people as someone, you know, that they shouldn't be misusing handicap spots, educating people about not mishandling the starfish. We try to be helpful. We're not traditional journalism by any stretch of the imagination. Yesterday we posted pictures of a car that went in the water. We think it's funny. It's what's going on in the community. As we've said before, the platform is called Cayman Mall Road for a reason. But many years ago, so I just wanted to preface that because when I do something personally for someone, I don't like to share what I do for people. They know what I've done. I know what I've done, and I just try to leave it there. I'm not one of these people that like to jump on about, oh yeah, I helped this person today. And, you know, first of all, if I did that, honestly, there were days I feel like I wouldn't get anything else done. But many years ago, I befriended a young lady who has a handicap and her family. And she has a physical handicap, but unfortunately her family decided that the best route, and I've always said that in this country, if you're an individual that falls outside of the norm, and the norm is this very narrow spectrum. So whether that means that you have ADHD, you have any sort of handicap, or not even that you're handicapped, but that you're extremely intelligent, this society doesn't know how to deal with you. And so some of the most intelligent people that we have on this island have turned to alcoholism and drugs because they grew up in environments and in homes that those persons did not know how to deal with them, how to treat them, because yeah, they were a little bit different. Maybe they were a little bit quirky, even because of their intelligence. They grew up in large families, and everybody else saw a mother who was coddling a child because he was always being bullied, and this is years ago before we even termed bullying. You know, the child was always being picked on, he was always being made fun of for loving books, for being a reader of books, for, you know, being maybe a little bit more quiet, or, you know, struggling with social issues, because a lot of people who are highly intelligent are not the most adept at communicating and, you know, dealing with people. They don't have the what we call now emotional intelligence, like a lot of the people skills and how to deal and interact with people. So my opinion has always been, and I think anyone who's my friend knows that I've said this on numerous occasions, if you fall outside of that spectrum, there are no resources available on this island to help you. There's a few more than there used to be, but those resources remain extremely limited. And that puts you at a disadvantage. And if you don't have a parent that understands your shortcomings or your gifts, because a lot of times these things have a double edge, you know, you might be autistic, and with autism comes gifts, but then there's a downside to that. And you just have to know as a parent, as a community, as a school, how to handle the downsides that come with some of these disorders. So I've always been of the opinion that if you're not in this very tightly packaged norm, K-Man doesn't know how to deal with you. So there was this young lady, and I don't want to give away who she is, so I don't want to say too much about her family dynamics or her situation. But she was in a situation where she had a physical impairment, a sight problem, because at birth something had been done by the medical professionals that impacted her. But as a result of that, her entire life, she was treated like she had a major handicap. When I eventually came to understand the extent of her sight problem, I was shocked, number one, that she was even put in Lighthouse School, because I didn't think that that was appropriate for her. There was nothing mentally wrong with her. When you would speak with her, she's very meek and humble, but even her ability to communicate with people was compromised, not because she was handicapped in any way in regards to that, but instead because the family just didn't know what to do. They just simply send kids to Lighthouse School, and for a lot of children, Lighthouse School isn't about preparing them to be a part of our community and a part of our society and being able to work and function on their own. Instead, what it's all about is a babysitting facility. Let them do arts and crafts, keep them occupied. In her case, she was actually made to assist the more heavily handicapped children, which I thought was such an injustice to her. And she would just be given coloring books. She never was taught to read, never given any life skills to hold down a job. She could have been a lawyer. She could have held down she could have held down a job as anything she wanted to be, police officer, whatever. So the sad indictment, this case just demonstrated, and this is my first example in this country, and this is many, many years ago, of becoming familiar with how we treat the handicapped community and how we limit them in ways that we shouldn't. So I know for years people have talked about how they were shut in. They couldn't even come out. So some of us have been so ashamed of the handicapped people in our families that we would not allow people to know that we had a handicapped member. We would lock them in a house and maybe had a helper feeding them and doing the bare basics. But, they were not provided early intervention programs. They were not provided with reading programs, nothing. And at one point, I traveled with this young lady. I said, listen, I was in the process of setting up a new business. So this was, like I said, many, many years ago. And I had to go to Miami for 4 or 5 days. And so I said to the guardians of the child, I said, would you allow this child to go away with me? The individual was becoming an adult in the sense that, she was graduating from high school. She's never traveled anywhere. I'm thinking, how do you have a child on this island that you've never allowed to travel and to see the world and experience things? And, so they agreed. They said, sure. So we went away. The first day, we go out, we go to Walmart, we get something to eat. This child is like on me like this. And I said, honey, let me tell you something. You can walk around. You can feel safe. I am right here. And I'm keeping an eye on you because, of course, you're somebody else's child and I don't want anything to happen to you. I'm going to keep an eye on you, but you don't have to hold on to me. You can feel free. Touch the clothes. Feel, you have a little bit of shopping money. Feel the things, what you want to buy. You know what you're permitted to buy. She came from a very religious family, so, you can't wear certain clothes above the knee kind of thing. And, you know what the rules are. If you see something that you like and you can't see the pricing on the item because of your sight issues, just let me know. Then I can step in and help you. But I want you to help yourself as much as possible. She said, okay, yes, ma'am. Yes, Miss Sandra. Let me tell you something. By the end of that week, I can't remember exactly how long we were away. I think it was like 5 or 6 days. By the end of that week, that young lady was such a different young lady. After just less than a week, basically. We were in the mall, we ran into a young lady that had Down syndrome. And the lady started talking to us. We had a long conversation with her. I had my hair, which you don't want to see right now. I had it like twisted in the front and then like the little curls and stuff in the back, right? And the young lady who has Down syndrome said to me, "Oh, miss, I love your hair. It's so pretty." And she touched my hair and she's like, one time my aunt in New York did my hair like this and I loved it. And we had this full conversation with her. So when we were done, we said bye. She was with a guardian in the mall. We said bye to her. And then I said to the young lady that I was with, I said, "Do you know that that young lady has something called Down syndrome?" And I tried to explain to her in simple terms what Down syndrome was. She was shocked. She's like, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." She has a mental disorder that limits her capacity, but yet she was speaking intelligently. She was engaged in the conversation. And the irony of the situation is she was more outgoing and speaking at a higher level than the young lady who was with me, who had been limited in life by what people chose to expose her to and the opportunities that her own family came in chose to give her. When she comprehended that here's someone who actually has a much more challenging handicap than you, that can operate at a higher level than you, she was hard. She was like, what? She found it hard to comprehend how that was even possible. And I just said to her, there's so much that you can do with your life. Whatever you want to do, but it's hard to take someone who's had 18 years of being put in this box, 18 years of inequality and no opportunities because their handicap was exaggerated to the point where they were limited. After that trip, her family was shocked. They're like, "We've never heard this young lady speak so much in her life. She has opened up as a result of this experience." I mean, imagine 1 week with me, 1 week of being able to travel to another country, seeing a few different things, talking about different things. And during the course of that week, I got to realize that this young lady's vision even wasn't as bad as I had thought. And it wasn't as bad as others were making it out to be. She could see shades of color. She could see a number of different things. So when I came back with her family's permission, I said, "Listen, you guys can do better by her. You can do so much more with her. Can we get her a machine?" I did some research and found out there was a machine that could be of immense help to her, assisting her in being able to see words in a book that would allow her to read. I said, "Can we get her this machine so that she could start reading even at the most basic of levels?" And the irony of it is that was one of the first times that I had any interaction with Alden McLaughlin, because at the time, Alden McLaughlin was the president of the Lions Club. And as you guys will know, the Lions Club has a sight program. And through that sight program, they would do things like collect, remember the old glasses frames? Like, I haven't heard of them doing it in a while, so I don't know if they still do it. But you could donate your old glasses and they reframe them and they send them overseas to people who, need glasses, who have sight issues, and that sort of thing. So I went to him, explained the situation of this young lady, explained how this piece of equipment would be beneficial to her, and asked if Lions would sponsor the donation of the equipment. And there was a lot of things that we had to go through to try to get it ordered and fitted specifically for the range of sight issues that she had. Once again, such a simple piece of equipment, it cost a couple $1,000s, was not made available here in the Cayman Islands. I don't think she's probably the only person with sight issues. And we are not investing in our people, whether it's like the normal people or the handicapped people. And my thing is, when you fall outside of that spectrum of the norm, we invest in you even less. We care even less. And so that's why I'm doing this in my shower cap this morning before I even properly get ready. Because when people like George Banks makes these comments, and I'm not picking on George, I'm just saying he's one of the people who's making the comments. When Marshall Durant makes these comments, when Angelita Edwards makes these comments, with this presumption that I'm making fun of a handicapped person, because I shared a video where someone interviewed them, they couldn't be further from the truth, because that's not what this is at all. You know, I've always tried to, in some small way, to be an advocate for people with disabilities and with handicaps in this country. As many of you know, my daughter's 3 years old, and I had her when I was in my early 40s. I waited for a number of different reasons. You never feel like you're financially ready. You never feel like you have the right partner and all these other things. And finally I said, okay, I think I'm there. I want to have a child. We tried for this child for in excess of a year. And when I had her, she was born a preemie. Throughout my entire pregnancy, there were concerns about the size of her. She was growing extremely small. The doctor didn't know why. This was at the height of the whole Zika thing. You know, so I remember at one point sitting in the doctor's office, and I had gone to Miami a couple times, and he said, listen, we got to send you overseas. We want to do some further testing to try to figure out what is going on with this child. And we couldn't see anything obvious, but she was just really growing, again, below the norm, below the circumference head size. Like everything was just below the norm, and we couldn't see a reason why. We did all this new fancy DNA testing. We couldn't get a test result. And one of the things that the doctor said to me, because we actually did the testing twice, and with this new blood test, normally what happens is, if you're not able to get a sample size, and that's what kept happening, you're not able to get a sample size big enough to then test the baby for birth defects. That in and of itself is normally an indication that something is wrong with the child. And so we were thinking, we're going to have a special needs child. And of course, as every parent, you think, what have I done? Is it because I waited too long? I'm in my 40s. This is going to be my fault. I mean, so many things go through your head in anticipation and in preparation of that. And that's kind of where my mind was as well, right? And at one point I went to Miami and I saw a genetic specialist. We went through a lot of different things. He did an hour-long ultrasound where they looked at every single detail of that baby that was in my womb. And he said, for some reason, your placenta is not supporting her sufficiently enough. And so you are at high risk of losing this child. And so here are the things that you need to do. In fact, he said to me, if you were my physician right here, right now, I would put you in the hospital on urgent bed rest for the remainder of your pregnancy. And this is like at 3 months. And I'm thinking, you want to put me in bed rest for 6 months of a 9-month pregnancy? Like, that's crazy. So I said, well, I can't do that, but I will take all of your other advice. So every single week, I was in the doctor's office, testing, doing all these things. And, you know, at one point, the doctor here said to me, the only last resort we have is we can do an amnio to see what's going on with this child. The physician in Miami had said to me, at 3 months, you're at high risk. If you do an amnio, you're more likely to lose the baby because of that procedure. And I said, absolutely not. Whether this child is handicapped or not, I don't care. So doing an amnio isn't going to change the end result of whether this child is going to come into this world, God willing. You know, it's not like I'm going to be prepared to abort this child or get rid of this child or, you know. So I will start prepare myself for that. We were at the time looking at trying to get a home. We pulled back and we said, nope, we're not going to commit financially to that, because if we have a special needs child, we know the costs involved. My husband's not from Cayman, so we were even considering what are our alternatives of moving overseas so that we can be in an environment that would give this child more access to the opportunities in life. Because I've always known and I've always felt that Cayman is not the ideal place for anyone with any sort of disability. So we were planning along those lines. At 8 months, the doctor said to me, I went in for another checkup and he said, listen, the baby's head circumference has dropped again. The percentile, she's down again, just 1 or 2 points. But from his experience, all of these things are incredibly critical. So we need to take this baby now. At 6 months, it wasn't viable to take her. At 7 months, we're getting closer, but we wanted your body to try to do its job of keeping her incubated for as long as possible. This last month that you have is too risky to let her stay in, knowing that her numbers keep dropping. So now we're at a risk of potentially you losing this child, and it's not worth the gains that you're going to get in a month of her growth development based on how she's growing isn't worth it. So I would recommend taking this baby out. So let's take her out in a couple days. We'll schedule a C-section at the hospital. We prepared. So normally preemies have an issue with lung development. Now there's steroid shots, a series of steroid shots that they give you in a 48-hour period of time to prepare the baby for coming out into the real world a little bit earlier. So we did all of that. There were some painful shots, trust me. We did all of that. She was born on August 9th, 2016. The tiniest thing in the world. And, I don't have to tell you guys as mothers what it's like to have a child, whether it's a natural birth, a C-section, it's like the most amazing thing. And when she first came out, she's super tiny. The neonatologist was there on hand. We had met with her beforehand, Dr. Sarah Watkins. We had prepped of what was going to happen. Right away, she went into incubation. And she was there for a month. It was feeding her, trying to get her prepared for life, making sure that she could suckle properly, all of these things. And the doctor said to me at some point around like the first week, listen, we don't see anything obvious wrong with this child. So we can continue testing, but it would be like looking for a needle in a haystack. So what we recommend from a medical professional perspective is now you just wait. You see what happens. If signs of things come up, because she didn't have anything obvious like Down syndrome or anything else, right? But if signs of different things come up, then based on those signs, we will know what it's more feasible to test for based on, what she's showing. So we said, okay. At the same time, there was another family in the hospital. They had a son named Max, and I know they're very vocal about their situation on social media, so I don't feel any way about calling Max's name. They've since gone overseas. Max was born a couple days, I think right after Gianna. And again, they weren't sure what was going on with Max, why he was born early. There were some concerns. He thought he started therapy because he did have muscles that were not very developed. So, Max was doing like physiotherapy from early on and all these other things. Eventually we left with Gianna, just knowing that she was tiny. She was 4 pounds, 1 ounce. And the most important thing was try to put some weight on her and just monitor her development. Thankfully, this baby, she's now 3 years old, is the perfect baby. She's still petite, she's still tiny, and the doctor said, hey, she's just a tiny baby. We don't really know what caused her growth development to this day, but she is doing fine in school. She's a chatterbox, go figure. She doesn't have any issues that we have yet determined. And Max, on the other hand, it later was found out that Christmas, when his mom went home to the UK, Dr. Watkins said, do some additional testing. I have some concerns about Max. And these tests are looking for gene issues. They're very specific. They're extremely expensive in Cayman. Having a handicapped child here, you incur so much expense. It's ridiculous, even just on the medical side. So when his parents went back to the UK, they did some testing and they found out that Max has a very unusual and rare disease where he's missing an entire chromosome. And because of that, he is severely handicapped and he will have a life full of issues. They don't even know what his life expectancy will be. But his issues are everything from intellectual development, physical developmental issues, and it's going to be a rough ride. And they are such amazing parents. And I must say, this really makes me a bit teary-eyed and upset, because when we were in the NICU, we got to know them a little bit as parents, because you're sharing this experience of having a preemie child that you're going there every 3 hours to feed and to try to bond with, and other parents are doing the exact same thing. So Max's mom, I was so impressed with her because she was able to produce so much milk for Max. Like, she was constantly pumping. And I felt a little bit jealous because I was pumping and wasn't really getting anything for Gianna. You know, she got like a little bit in the first couple days. And I sat there feeling a little bit jealous at one point. Like, man, I wish I could pump as much milk as this, you know, much younger mom, is how I was thinking it. And I would sit there and look at the two of them. I'm like, oh, they're so full of energy. Like, they're perfect parents in that sense. You know, like, this child is going to have a wonderful life because they're young, they're vibrant. You know, I didn't foresee that they were going to have a child with extreme developmental, physically and emotionally issues for the rest of that child's life, and not even knowing how long that child was going to live for. And so their struggle began that December in earnest, when they fully understood, after their child was diagnosed, exactly what that child had. And I love, you know, they post things online about Max. They left this jurisdiction because, again, the medical care, the, you know, ongoing services that he can get in the UK, there'd be nothing here available like that for him. You know, he's into swimming therapy, and he does a lot to try to help him be the best that he can with the limitations that he has. He will never be able to speak. He will be a nonverbal child. He constantly has seizures, like, all the time. And they have him on special medication now that does help with the seizures. But this will be a constant battle. Like, one time she explained on her Facebook page all of the things that Max will have to deal with in his lifetime, and his parents that they will have to deal with. The inability to walk, the inability to talk, the constant seizures. He's more likely to get, you know, infections. So he's kind of in and out of the hospital all the time. You know, but they have still embraced him. They still try to make his life fun. They have gotten, you know, him into therapy. They've gotten him into like little boots where they can strap him to them and simulate walking, so he can kind of get an idea of what it's like to walk a little bit instead of constantly being in a wheelchair. And so, you know, even that experience and having gone through that, I would hope that I am never seen as a person who is not sensitive to the handicap community. And, you know, people, you know, when people comment on social media, they don't know anything about you. They don't know your story. They don't know your life experiences. And we've all been guilty of this, because sometimes what we see in our very narrow blinders is one thing, and the true picture of actually what is going on and what's happening is totally different. So I just wanted to provide a little bit of background information on this video, why I thought it was important to share the video, why I don't see anything wrong with Mr. Albert having an opinion. I'm glad, actually, that someone thought of Mr. Albert. Like, oh, Mr. Albert, what do you think? Why not? Why should he be excluded? Mr. Albert is a person just like everybody else. Mr. Albert clearly has an opinion. He was able to articulate that opinion so that we all could see it. And I did not, and this is just my opinion, I looked at the video again. The questions were serious questions. I honestly did not see how, you know, the questions were attempting to make fun of Mr. Albert in any way. They were asking questions like, what do you think about what Mr. Bush did? And for Albert to say that, you know, that upset him, that angered him, that wasn't something that should have been done, you know, that no one should be hit. Albert gets that. Albert understands that. There are people who are playing political games in this country who don't seem to even get that message. So, you know, I hope that this live, and again, I felt compelled to do this even before I really start my day today, because to me, this is such an important issue. And I felt the comments that were being directed at me about using this video, because I think a lot of those persons thought that, you know, I recorded the video and there's some kind of joke or malice or something behind it, and that actually wasn't the case. But I just wanted to clear the air in terms of, you know, people, or you should be ashamed of yourself for stooping this low. Are you serious? Like, why do you think someone is stooping low? Because they interview a person outside of the norm or a person with a handicap? Are they not entitled to share in our community, to have an opinion? You know, every single agriculture day, every single Red Sky event that I've gone to, there's a young man who, I think he's from East End, who stands up at the front of the podium, and all of the artists who sing, whether it's Izzy from Bonafide, whether it's the entire group from Swanky Band, they all see this young man up front and center, dancing and enjoying himself. It appears that he has some sort of a learning disability, and I don't know to what extent. But I love the fact that he is engaged, and his family allows him to come out. They allow him to, he obviously loves music, and they allow him to participate every single year without fail, every single agriculture show you go to. Sometimes he is the only person on the dance floor enjoying himself. And I love that. And I don't see anything wrong with that. I think that's wonderful. And more people should bring out their handicapped children to enjoy and be part of the community and be part of the process. Involve them in politics. What's wrong with that? If they can understand, even at a basic level, what's going on, why not take their opinion? Why not ask them what they think? Why not involve them in social media? You know, we're all part of this network. We're all part of this community. So what is the problem with involving people who we don't consider to be in the spectrum of the norm, who may have some, you know, handicap, some intellectual deficiencies, I guess is what you'd call it. Like I said, I don't specifically know what Mr. Albert's limitations are. But a limitation doesn't mean that you should be excluded entirely from the process. And so that's kind of just like what I wanted to share with you guys this morning, is a few thoughts on that. Continue to tune in to the program. Obviously tonight we'll have a regular show at 7:30, God's willing. I wish you guys a wonderful day. And again, just remember that perspective can be a hell of a thing. I'm actually trying to arrange an interview with a young man who brought the story to us about the taxi driver who sexually molested him. And I'm going to talk to you guys a little bit about that this evening. I'm hoping that that show will be this evening. And I'm hoping that you guys will show your solidarity with the victim and your support of him and tune into that program. But I will let you guys know as soon as possible if we were able to confirm his attendance, because we are trying to protect his identity. And that's the most important thing right now for me, is to protect him, so that he doesn't get this onslaught of comments from people who already have an opinion that a convicted child rapist should have more rights than the rest of us in some sense of the word. So please stay tuned. I wish you guys a wonderful day. And, you know, now it's time to get to work. Have a good one.